saying earlier is in terms of sensuality, in terms of anger, but you said something particularly which I want to just quote you basically. The only reason why one gives into sensuality is because one doesn't want it. If you could explain that.
Well, what I meant was that so universally, literally, to every human mind, regardless of the culture, education, religion, practice, whether they heard about Buddhism or not, doesn't matter. When a desire arises in regard to anything obtainable through the senses, when that desire arises, that desire is oppressing that person. Desire is that sort of lack, pressure, a need, thirst, hunger, whatever. It means it makes you act. It pressures you. I mean, you don't have to act. That's the whole point. As a human being, you have a choice. But when desire arises, the automatic response is to give in to that pressure of the desire. And why would you be giving in to the pressure of any desire? It's because it's unpleasant. If the pressure of the desire is neutral or pleasant, you wouldn't then spend all the efforts and time gaining what your desire wants, because you'll already be at ease. But that desire, it's already unpleasant. So in order for you to deal with that displeasure, you just give in to whatever the desire promises. So that's what I mean. By engaging in sensuality, you do so to be free from the central pressure of the desire. So when people say, no, I enjoy my senses, that's a mistake that they themselves believe in. If they were to stop and think about it and see, when there is a non-satisfied or unsatisfied desire, is that pleasant? Is that what you want? It isn't. You enjoy sensuality for as long as you think and hold a view that you can access things that your senses want to. But sooner or later, time will come when you won't be able to fulfill your desires. And then, again, you don't just think, oh, these particular desires I can't fulfill. I mean, some people might think that. But the point is to see then the nature of the desire in the first place. Even the ones you can fulfill, so to speak, as in give in to their pressure and seek the object of that desire until you feel fed up with it and then you feel like my desire disappears. So in other words, you can never fulfill the desire. Because the point of desire is to stay a desire.
Based on non-satisfaction.
Exactly. It requires a non-satisfaction for it to be. So that's why if you stop and think about it, you realize the only reason you are engaged with sensuality, people would be engaged with sensuality, is because the pressure of the desire is unpleasant. And they don't know any other escape. And that's the whole point. And that's and same, like then whenever you encounter any other form of displeasure, your only way of dealing it is sensuality, which is how people turn to food, music, sexual intercourse or whatever else. When they're sort of feeling down or depressed or something's bothering them, they just commit harder, because that's the only form that they can resemble a relief of relieving oneself of that pressure. But actually you're just making it worse, because the more you're dependent on running away from the desire, the more pressure that desire will exercise over you.
So what should you do?
Well, first, I mean, you don't have to do anything in a way, but then you just remain. If you start seeing your own sensuality, your own desires as something that's controlling you, that you are enslaved by, then you have to start seeing in the nature of, before you give in to the desire, how it feels to just have the desire. And then it becomes like obviously clear as a day that it's very unpleasant. Like even sometimes when you can satisfy your desires, but maybe not quickly enough, that's unpleasant. Either way, that discrepancy of desire is rooted in a disagreeable feeling. That pressure, it's very unpleasant. So if you want to free yourself from it, you have to first start restraining and making it worse through giving in to that pressure of desire. Literally, it's like, oh, you're training yourself to be stronger than something else. But in order to start doing that, you need to start resisting that thing you're trying to be strong in regard to. So if you just habitually are giving in to the desire, and at the same time expect to somehow be magically free from the pressure of the desire, well, that's just a contradiction in terms. So the restraint needs to come first. For the one who wants to be free from desire, restraint needs to come first. Then the obvious, painful nature of the desire in itself becomes apparent. And I said that before, maybe in other audio talks similar. And that's like initially when people start restraining, that pain that arises from the desire, they would think it's because of my restraint. But it isn't. Restraint cannot cause you pain. It can only reveal the underlying pain of the desire and not getting what the desire wants. And the simile of the 5 animals, like pulling you in every, that the Buddha gave in like eye, nose, ear, mouth, and the body, and as such, they're pulling you in their own domains to feed in their own respective feeding grounds. So every animal wants to go and eat as much as it likes. So eyes just want to go and look at the pleasurable sights and avoid displeasure, and same goes for every sense. So you can imagine that your experience, the whole your existence, is basically you're tied to these 5 animals. You're inseparable from, and they're always overpowering you, and you're enabling them even further when you're carelessly just giving in to whatever desire your eye wants to have, or your ears, or your sense of touch. So you can imagine if you're tied to 5 powerful animals and they start running towards their respective goals, objects of their desire, you just run with it to avoid that terribly painful pull that you will experience if you try standing your ground, but the animals are stronger than you. They will yank you and it will be very unpleasant. But that doesn't mean that pain is not there if you run with them, because that enables them to pull you even harder. So initially you have to accept that sharp pain of restraint, which eventually you can see that it's not the restraint. Restraint just shows me what happens when these animals yank in their respective domains and I don't give in. Because if the animals wouldn't be yanking, there wouldn't be any pain revealed by the restraint. Imagine the animals are tamed and calm and they just walk slowly. And you can just remain seated and not have to run with them so they don't rip your arm off. But initially people get confused, and then they might start doing the restraint, but then all the pain that arises as a result of being yanked by these 5 senses, they think it's because they're saying no. They think it's because of the restraint. And then eventually they give back in. But it's not. That pain is the nature of being pressured by the senses, by the sense desire. It's just when you run along with it, you kind of minimize the pull, so you pretend it's not there. But the fact is, all you have to do is say no to the desire and you'll see whether it's still there or not, that pain. And it is, unless you're completely free, of course. So that's something anybody could benefit from. Just learning how to say no to themselves gradually, more in regard to this, in regard to unnecessary things, in regard to unnecessary luxuries, in regard to unnecessary indulgences. Because each time you give in carelessly like that, the animals get more to feed on, which means they get more powerful, which means each time they pull you, you'll be less and less able to resist those desires. And very often, and I'm pretty sure many people can relate to that out of their experience, your own desires takes you to the places you don't want to be. That you'll know you regret it even beforehand, yet you can't help it and you're just dragged there. And let alone when the old age sets in, or sickness, when your senses start to fail, yet your mind is fully dependent on that pleasure that you get from that remote satisfaction of your desires, then the only source, as I said before, the only kind of remotely resemblance way of relief from any disagreeable feelings is taken away now. Because senses can't enjoy anymore. Eyes can barely see, it's painful to listen, it's hard to chew. Body doesn't listen, it's not young, doesn't have that much energy. Yet your mind was dependent on that constant run, and now that's just taken away. So when the unpleasant feelings arise, and they will inevitably, now you have even less ground to deal with it.
It's like a solitary confinement.
That's why people are terrified of solitude, exactly, yeah.